Assumication, the problem with your communication. An article by MMmedia. I wonder how many people you misunderstand daily. If you were to really analyze your communication patterns with your parents, your friends, your significant other, your kids, and with the media you interact with online, would you find that you are correctly interpreting everything you come across? Maybe in some cases you are. Perhaps there are certain dialogues that you process and respond to clearly. However, I would bet there are more instances where you are assuming past what you hear. I recently had this revelation myself. I was telling my therapist about a conversation I had with an old friend, and I was describing how what she said made me feel. My therapist asked me when I was done explaining if I had asked my friend what she meant by her statements. Of course, my response was no, because in my head, there was no need for clarification. I had heard what she said, and my immediate feelings confirmed that she had meant exactly what I took the conversation for. But how do you really know? My therapist asked me. I sat with that question for a moment, and I realized my therapist was right. How did I really know? I mean, that friend and I are not the same person, so logically, it would not make sense to assume that we think exactly the same. And that is when the real terror hit me. How often have I been assuming what people mean when they speak to me? Have I sacrificed relationships and potential connections because of assumptions? It was the Irish playwright Oscar Wilde who famously said, "When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me." Nearly 121 years later, and that philosophy still holds legitimate leverage. There is no other surefire way to know what a person is truly saying unless we ask. Assuming another person's intentions is the root of all miscommunication. We are not them, therefore, we should not think for them. That seems obvious, right? Complete understanding is needed in order to fully comprehend a conversation's message. True. But what is not so obvious is how barriers compete with our ability to ask for clarification. A 2012 article about communication, written by Gwen Tetreault, found that people rarely feel comfortable admitting that they do not understand something. There is an unperceived vulnerability that comes with feeling in the dark about a topic one is assumed to fathom that can spark embarrassment for a listener. Think to a time where you pretended to comprehend anything, maybe a subject in school, or a news article you found online, or even a personal story told to you by a friend. What kept you from saying, "I do not understand"? It is possible that you are the suffer in silence until you figure it out type, but more likely, you have felt the discomfort that being out of the loop can bring. Perhaps it felt embarrassing to not completely recognize what you were hearing. According to Tetreault, that distress is amplified when we perceive ourselves to be the only one who does not understand. Those disoriented feelings can leave us in a performance space where we are playing the part of someone who grasps the information. How did you land the role? Did you nod your head? Maybe lean in to show some active listening? I have been there. Tetreault further explains how even affirming body language, such as a head nod or verbal silence when asking if there are any questions, is still not enough information to assume that someone comprehends fully what you have communicated. Your listener could simply be disguising their confusion. Conversation in this sense is a twofold experience, where not only should the listener ask for clarification about what they are hearing, but also the speaker would be careful to ask the responder to restate what they think they have heard. To put it simply, no conversation thrives when assumptions are happening on either side. Similarly to how confusion can cause one to assume, overconfidence proves to be the other reason people so often communicate incorrectly. International author Shirley Taylor says that communicators tend to believe they know what the other person is going to say before they say it. This sureness is supported through various confirmations, such as familiarity with the speaker or topic, the subconscious insertion of our own beliefs, and the need to steer the conversation in a direction that is most favorable for our own perspective. As a result, assuming leads to delays in communication where time is spent having to undo what the other person assumes to be true. As well, misinformation gathered through assuming can potentially create rigid or uncompromising feelings among those communicating. In other words, thinking for another person wastes time and can hurt feelings. Taylor's insight leads me back to my original question. What in my life has been altered or destroyed due to assuming instead of asking? What about you? Are there instances in your life where you have allowed what you think you know to act as all the evidence you need? Well, now that we are all cringing at our past conversations, what can we do to ensure we are better communicators in the future? First and foremost, We have to get comfortable with the idea that we could be wrong. Assumptions are based on the notion that we know what is true. So to counteract those expectations, we must keep an open mind and be willing to learn as we communicate. Secondly, we have to voice our confusion. We should recognize that everyone feels lost at some point, and that asking for clarification does not mean we are unintelligent. As an annexation to step 2 for better communication, how you voice your confusion plays a big part in the overall effectiveness of the conversation. In a therapist's breakdown of couples fighting in film, done by GQ on YouTube, it was explained that using I statements when communicating misunderstandings and when asking for clarification is the best way to have the other person hear your concerns. Taking an I stance, such as, "I heard you say that you were worried. To me, that sounds like you are nervous about the big game. Is that true?" Rather than saying, "You are worried because you are nervous about the big game," allows the person you are speaking with the opportunity to define what they are communicating. The first example is less argumentative and allows space to learn accurate information from the other person in the conversation. Assuming for someone can make them defensive, which can in turn change the dynamic of the conversation for the worse. Thirdly, listen to and focus on what is being communicated. As a participant in the conversation, your job is to remain present while the other person is speaking. Tuning out the speaker or solely concentrating on your own response will lead to misinformation and then to miscommunication. Staying in the moment is not only polite, but it is a great way to ensure you do not miss valuable information that will help you to respond in a way that is accurate and in a way that keeps the conversation flowing. Now, we have identified a huge problem in communication, and we have discussed ways to combat our mistakes. All that is left to do is to have conversations with our peers, apply this new knowledge, and gather the data from our results. Though it may feel a bit challenging in the beginning, I have faith that being more conscious of our communication styles will lead to more pleasant interactions with others. Who knows? This change may mean the difference in our lives taking some lucrative turns. Happy communicating. This has been Assumication, the problem with your communication, an article by MMmedia.